Good morning. Today, Christian and Hopeful continue their journey after a time of refreshment following their time with Demas the silversmith, which they rejected his temptations. So now they continue. Now I beheld in my dream that they had not journeyed far, but the river and the way for a time parted, at which they were not a little sorry, yet they durst not go out of the way. Now the way from the river was rough, and their feet tender by reason of their travels. So the soul of the pilgrims was much discouraged because of the way. Wherefore still as they went on, they wished for a better way. Now a little before them there was on the left hand of the road a meadow, and a stile to go over into it. And that meadow is called Bypath Meadow. Then said Christian to his fellow, If this meadow lieth along our wayside, let's go over into it. Then he went to the stile to see, and behold, a path lay along by the way on the other side of the fence. "'Tis according to my wish," said Christian. "Here is the easiest going. Come, good Hopeful, and let us go over." Hopeful. But how if this path should lead us out of the way? Christian. That's not like. Look, doth it not go by the wayside? So Hopeful, being persuaded by his fellow, went after him over the stile. When they were gone over and were got into the path, they found it very easy for their feet. And withal, they looking before them, espied a man walking as they did. His name was Vain Confidence. So they called after him, and asked him whither the outway led. He said, To the celestial gate. "Look," said Christian, "did I not tell you so? By this you may see we are right." So they followed, and he went before them. But behold, the night came on, and it grew very dark. So that they were behind, they that were behind lost the sight of him that went before. He therefore that went before, Vain Confidence by name, not seeing the way before him, fell into a deep pit, which was on purpose there made by the prince of those grounds, to catch vain glorious fools withal, and was dashed in pieces with his fall. Now Christian and his fellow heard him fall. So they called to know the matter, but there was none to answer. Only they heard a groaning. Then said Hopeful, Where are we now? Then was his fellow silent, as mistrusting that he had led him out of the way. And now it began to rain and thunder and lighten in a very dreadful manner, and the water rose amain. Then Hopeful groaned in himself, saying, Oh, that I kept on my own way. Christian. Who could have thought that this path should have led us out of the way? Hopeful. I was afraid on it at very first, and therefore gave you that gentle caution. I would have spoke plainer, but you are older than I. Christian. Good brother, be not offended. I am sorry I have brought thee out of the way, and that I have put thee into such imminent danger. Pray, my brother, forgive me. I did not do it of an evil intent. Hopeful. Be comforted, my brother, for I forgive thee, and believe too that this shall be for our good. Christian. I am glad I have with me a merciful brother, but we must not stand thus. Let's try to go back again. Hopeful. But good brother, let me go before. Christian. No, if you please, let me go first, that if there be any danger, I may be first therein, because by my means we are both gone out of the way. No, said Hopeful, you shall not go first, for your mind being troubled may lead you out of the way again. Then for their encouragement they heard the voice of one saying, Let thine heart be towards the highway, even the way that thou wentest, turn again. But by this time the waters were greatly risen, by reason of which the way of going back was very dangerous. Then I thought that it is easier to go out of the way when we are in, than going in when we are out. Yet they had ventured to go back, but it was so dark, and the flood so high, that in their going back they like to have been drowned 9 or 10 times. Neither could they, with all the skill they had, get again to the stile that night. Wherefore at last, lighting under a little shelter, they sat down there till the daybreak, but being weary, they fell asleep. Now there was not far from the place where they lay a castle, called Doubting Castle, the owner whereof was Giant Despair, and it was in his grounds they were now sleeping. Wherefore he, getting up in the morning early, and walking up and down in his fields, caught Christian and Hopeful asleep in his grounds. Then with a grim and surly voice he bid them awake, and asked them whence they were, and what they did in his grounds. They told him they were pilgrims, and that they had lost their way. Then said the giant, You have this night trespassed on me by trampling in and lying on my grounds. and therefore you must go along with me." So they were forced to go because he was stronger than they. They also had but little to say, for they themselves knew they were in a fault. The giant therefore drove them before him, and put them into his castle, into a very dark dungeon, nasty and stinking to the spirit of these two men. Here then they lay from Wednesday morning till Saturday night, without one bit of bread, drop of drink, or any light, or any to ask how they did. They were therefore here in evil case, and were far from friends and acquaintance. Now in this place Christian had double sorrow, because 'twas through his unadvised haste that they were brought into this distress. Now Giant Despair had a wife, and her name was Diffidence. So when he was gone to bed, he told his wife that what he had done, to wit, that he had taken a couple of prisoners, and cast them into his dungeon for trespassing on his grounds. Then he asked her also what he had best do further to them. So she asked him what they were, and whence they came, and whither they were bound, and he told her. Then she counselled him that when he arose in the morning he should beat them without any mercy. So when he arose, he, getting him a grievous crab-tree cudgel, goes down into the dungeon to them, and there first falls to rating of them as if they were dogs, although they gave him never a word of distaste. Then he falls upon them and beats them fearfully, in such sort that they were not able to help themselves, or to turn them upon the floor. This done, he withdraws and leaves them, there to condole their misery, and to mourn under their distress. So all that day they spent the time in nothing but sighs and bitter lamentations. The next night she, talking with her husband about them further, and understanding that they were yet alive, did advise him to counsel them to make away themselves. So when morning was come, he goes to them in a surly manner as before, and perceiving them to be very sore with the stripes that he had given them the day before, he told them that since they were never like to come out of that place, their only way would be forthwith to make an end of themselves, either with knife, halter, or poison. For why, said he, should you choose life, seeing it is attended with so much bitterness? But they desired him to let them go. With that he looked ugly upon them, and rushing to them had doubtless made an end of himself, but that he fell into one of his fits, for sometimes he in sunshine weather fell into fits, and lost for a time the use of his hand. Wherefore he withdrew, and left them as before, to consider what to do. Then did the prisoners consult between themselves whether 'twas best to take his counsel or no, and thus they began to discourse. So this discourse will be the subject of our next reading. It's a fairly lengthy discourse about the worth of ending it all when in hardship and in time of despair. So we will see how the pilgrims respond to this time of deep testing and deep struggle, a time which they had brought about by their own bad choices, and that makes it difficult as well. So see how they deal with the giant despair and how they deal with this time of doubt and discouragement. It's very telling in light of Bunyan's own experience of imprisonment and struggle in his life, how these same themes are reflected in the Pilgrim's Progress very clearly. Elements of autobiography here, elements of Bunyan's own experience. So thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great day.